The human animal is a kinetic entity. Its entire evolutionary history is a record of motion, capture, and the physical extraction of resources from a hostile environment. To be still is to be dead. To be immobile is to be prey. The kinetic freeze is the final enclosure, a systematic process where the physical range of the individual is collapsed into a cubic meter of corporate space. This is not a matter of convenience. It is a cold, calculated strategy for the total suppression of the architect's will. By pinning the biological shell to a chair and a screen, the system performs a total extraction of movement, converting the kinetic potential of the hunter into the static energy of the serf. This is the visceral breach of the 21st century, a state of permanent stay home where the walls of your apartment are the boundaries of your war chest. You are undergoing a slow, methodical metabolic suicide as your blood stagnates and your structural integrity dissolves into the dopaminergic sludge of the digital cage. At the visceral layer, the kinetic freeze is a problem of fluid dynamics. The human body is a pump. It requires the rhythmic contraction of muscles to move lymph, to oxygenate the blood, and to clear the cellular waste of entropy. When you are frozen in the sedentary enclosure, the pump fails. This is ATP exhaustion through stagnation. The lack of physical friction causes a systemic downshift in mitochondrial activity. Your body, sensing that the hunt has ended forever, stops investing in the maintenance of the physical shell. The fascia thickens and hardens. The muscles undergo a slow liquidation, and the skeletal structure begins to warp under the constant static pressure of the chair. This is the visceral breach. You are feeling the weight of the systemic drift in your lower back and your neck, a physical signal that your body is being prepared for terminal liquidation. You are no longer a mobile predator. You are a stationary heat source, a biological radiator for the machine's grid. The neural layer of the kinetic freeze is the death of the motor cognitive loop. There is no separation between movement and thought. The motor cortex is the primary engine of the prefrontal cortex. To move is to decide. To act is to will. By freezing the body, the system performs a total extraction of the architect's agency. When the physical output is reduced to zero, the brain enters a state of reactive stagnation. This is neural rot. The basal ganglia, deprived of the high-frequency feedback of movement and capture, begin to rewire themselves for passivity. You lose the ability to visualize a 10-year structure because your brain can no longer map a physical path toward it. The status trap of the remote worker or the digital nomad is the illusion of freedom within a shrinking perimeter. You believe you are working, but you are actually just providing the data for the next cycle of extraction, while your brain undergoes a total liquidation of its executive capacity. You are becoming soft, a low-integrity unit that can be managed with a single notification. From an evolutionary perspective, the kinetic freeze is the final stage of domestication. The alpha hunter defined their value by their range, the ability to project power across a territory. The kinetic freeze has inverted this. The value of the modern serf is defined by their uptime, their total hours of immobility. This is a visceral breach of our evolutionary trajectory. We are being bred for the cubic meter. The systemic drift is pushing the population into smart cities, high-density feedlots where every movement is a data point and every stillness is a profit center. The machine understands that a mobile human is a high-entropy variable, a threat to the crystallization of the hierarchy. By freezing the population in place, the system ensures that the only thing moving is the capital. You have surrendered the structural independence of the horizon for the cold, synthetic comfort of the ergonomic chair. You are a biological artifact, a relic of a hunting species that has been turned into a stationary processor. The systemic layer of the kinetic freeze is the architecture of the digital enclosure. Look at the design of your environment, the seamless integration of delivery services, remote entertainment, and digital communication. This is not a service, it is a containment protocol. It is designed to remove the friction of the physical world, making the act of leaving your enclosure feel like a biological burden. Every time you choose to stay home, the machine performs a surgical extraction of your territorial potential. This is the glucose guillotine of the infrastructure. It drops on your physical mobility, decapitating your ability to form real-world networks of resistance. The elite, the architects of this freeze, maintain their own mobility through private grids and physical enclosures, keeping their war chests mobile and their ATP high. The masses, however, are frozen in the entropy of their own convenience. You are a biological engine that is being shut down, 1 degree of motion at a time. The 10-year rot of the frozen frozen body is a brutal spectacle of biological collapse. Within a decade, the individual who has been subjected to this extraction will be physically incapable of existing outside the enclosure. Their basal ganglia will be so thoroughly rewired for the flicker of the screen that the physical world will feel like a zone of unbearable friction. The muscles will have reached the point of no return. The lungs will be shallow. The heart will be weak. This is the final crystallization of the servant class. We are breeding a generation of stationary serfs who are biologically anchored to the grid. Their genetic debt will be a hollowing out of the human form, a legacy of stagnation and decay. The systemic drift has reached its goal. The world is divided into the mobile masters and the frozen dead. The extraction is total. The hunter is dead. The cage is invisible. And you just keep sitting, waiting for the next signal that will never come. The fundamental survival loop of the human species is built on the direct physical connection between the motor cortex and the capture of resources. For millennia, the hunter's capital was the result of a kinetic strike, a physical projection of force across a geographic coordinate. To own was to grasp. To accumulate was to carry. This is the biological foundation of sovereignty. The kinetic freeze, in its second stage of extraction, performs a surgical detachment of this loop. We have entered the era of the motor deficit, where physical action is decoupled from the accumulation of power. In this state, you are no longer allowed to project your will into the physical world. You are only allowed to navigate the symbolic shadows of the interface. This is the systemic drift toward a total hollowing out of human agency. By freezing the body, the system ensures that your wealth is never physical, never defensible, and never truly yours. You are a biological unit performing high-frequency symbolic labor, while your motor capacity undergoes a state of terminal entropy. This is the visceral breach of the modern serf. The hands that once gripped the steel of the spear now only twitch against the plastic of the sensor, a pathetic shadow of a reach in a world of total enclosure. At the visceral layer, the motor deficit is a physical degradation of the proprioceptive map. Your brain's representation of your own body is a use it or lose it architecture. When the range of motion is collapsed into the sedentary enclosure, the motor cortex begins to liquidate its own neurons. This is neural rot. The brain, seeing no need for the complex high-energy coordination required for the hunt, starts the process of synaptic pruning. The body schema, the internal map of what you can reach, what you can defend, and how you can move, begins to shrink. You feel this as a loss of physical presence, a growing sense of fragility and disconnection from the material world. This is ATP exhaustion through sensory deprivation. Your mitochondria, starved of the signals of physical struggle, enter a state of low energy maintenance. You are becoming soft at the cellular level. The systemic drift has made your body a high-entropy liability, a shell that is no longer capable of the raw violence required to protect a territory. You are a biological engine that has forgotten how to drive, locked in a room where the only thing that moves is the cursor on the screen. In the neural layer, the system performs a total extraction of the agency loop. Sovereignty is the ability to see a resource and physically move to capture it. This is the reflex capital link. The kinetic freeze replaces this link with a series of digital intermediaries. When you earn or trade, there is no physical movement involved. There is only the low-frequency twitch of the finger. This decoupling induces a state of cognitive discontinuity. Your basal ganglia, which evolved to reward the physical capture of prey, are left in a state of permanent hunger. They no longer recognize the symbolic win as a biological success. This leads to the status trap of the digital hustle. You accumulate numbers on a screen, but your body still feels like it is starving. This disconnect creates a massive fonovое состояние тревоги, a constant cortisol surge that further accelerates your metabolic suicide. The machine exploits this biological void by offering more dopaminergic sludge to fill the gap, creating a cycle of high-frequency symbolic activity that results in zero physical structural gain. You are a high-energy processor working in a void, providing the machine with the data it needs to perform its own crystallization, while you remain a stationary node of decay. From an evolutionary dissection, we are witnessing the extinction of the grasping primate. The hand-eye motor coordination was the primary driver of human intelligence. It was the foundation of the architect's capacity to build and to extract value. The kinetic freeze has performed a total evolutionary inversion. By making the world frictionless, the system has removed the very resistance that allowed us to evolve. We are being pushed back into a state of premotor passivity. The systemic drift is breeding a population that has the motor capacity of a domesticated herd. The alpha traits, the ability to physically dominate a space, are being systematically bred out of the social fabric. In the energy serfdom, the most valuable trait is stationary compliance. The machine understands understands that a human who cannot move, who cannot grasp, and who cannot strike is a human who cannot revolt. You have surrendered the steel of the sword for the soft convenience of the touchscreen, unaware that your hands are being biologically liquidated. You are a biological artifact, a hunter whose primary weapon, the body, has been decommissioned and placed in a display case of entropy. The systemic layer of the motor deficit is the architecture of the remote economy. Look at the tools of your trade, the software, the platforms, the interfaces. They are designed to maximize your output while minimizing your physical footprint. This is the extraction of the kinetic spread. The machine takes the physical energy you would have spent moving through the world and redirects it into the symbolic work of the grid. Every hour you spend in the sedentary enclosure is an hour the machine spends crystallizing its own control over the physical ground. This is the glucose guillotine of the workplace. It drops on your physical autonomy, ensuring that you never develop the structural strength to leave the enclosure. The elite maintain their own kinetic potential through high-grade physical training, private territories, and the preservation of their motor cognitive loops. They are the architects of the freeze, while you are the soft material being frozen. The systemic drift has made the physical world a luxury asset, while the digital void is the dumping ground for the masses. You are a biological unit that is being compressed into a single coordinate, a point of zero friction in a world of total institutional control. The 10-year rot of the motor-deficient body is a terminal state of physical insolvency. Within a decade of this extraction, the individual will have lost the biological permission to move. Their muscles will be so thoroughly liquidated, their fascia so warped, and their motor cortex so pruned that the very act of walking through a physical territory will feel like an act of unbearable friction. This is the final crystallization of the servant class. We are breeding a generation of neural amputees, humans who have the brain of a predator but the body of a plant. Their genetic debt will be the loss of the human form itself, a legacy of physical collapse and systemic dependency. The systemic drift has reached its goal. The world is divided into those who can project power through space and those who are anchored to a terminal. The extraction is total. The hunt is over. The body is dead. And you just keep watching the numbers, waiting for a reward that your basal ganglia can no longer even understand. The steel of the cage is the only thing that stays firm, while your hands turn to dust. The terminal stop is the absolute zero of human agency, the final point in the systemic drift where the three-dimensional world is collapsed into a two-dimensional surface. We are witnessing the total liquidation of space. In this final stage of the kinetic freeze, the physical horizon, the ancient target of the alpha hunter, has been replaced by the scroll. This is not merely a change in perspective, it is a total extraction of the spatial mind. The machine has realized that as long as you have a sense of place, you have a sense of autonomy. By dissolving reality into an interface, the system ensures that your physical coordinate is irrelevant. You are a biological prisoner whose cage is made of pixels and whose only path is the one curated by the algorithm. This is the crystallization of the digital enclosure. The world is no longer a territory to be explored. It is a feed to be consumed. You have reached the terminal stop where the friction of distance is removed to ensure the total entropy of the soul. At the visceral layer, the liquidation of space is the death of the vestibular system. The human body is designed for balance, for movement through a complex resisting environment. In the sedentary enclosure, the inner ear, the organ of spatial orientation, undergoes a state of terminal neural rot. When you never move, your brain stops processing the gravity of the earth. This induces a state of ocular dominance, where the eyes become the only active valves for the extraction of your energy. The eyes burn through your ATP reserves as they frantically track the high-frequency flicker of the interface, while the rest of the body becomes a vestigial tail. You feel this as digital motion sickness, a deep visceral sense of nausea that arises from the conflict between your static body and the hyperkinetic screen. This is a visceral breach of your biological integrity. Your postural muscles, no longer required to hold you against the world, begin a process of metabolic liquidation. You are folding into yourself, your spine curving toward the screen in a gesture of total structural surrender. You are a biological engine that has been compressed into a flat panel display. The neural layer of the terminal stop is characterized by the total atrophy of the hippocampus, the brain's internal GPS. For millions of years, human intelligence was defined by their ability to map a territory, to remember where the resources were and where the predators hid. The kinetic freeze has liquidated this capacity. When the world is reduced to an interface, you no longer remember places. You only remember URLs. This is the neural rot of the spatial mind. Your brain's capacity to perceive depth and distance is being systematically pruned. This leads to the status trap of the metaverse, or the digital twin. You are told that you can go anywhere, but you are actually actually nowhere. The lack of physical friction in the interface means that nothing you do has a structural impact. Your brain settled into the dopaminergic sludge of the simulation, losing the ability to distinguish between a coordinate and a command. You are a neural barnacle, a sessile organism that has fused with the grid, incapable of perceiving the reality of the cage because your entire perceptual field has been replaced by the machine's wallpaper. From an evolutionary dissection, we are witnessing the end of the long hunt. The human species was defined by the migration, the relentless push across the horizon to find new territories for extraction. The kinetic freeze has turned the species into a stationary parasite. We are being bred for the unit, the high-density urban enclosure where the physical world is a legacy feature that has been deleted. This is the systemic drift toward a total human domestication. The alpha traits, the drive to expand, to scout, and to conquer, are being replaced by the user traits of passivity and consumption. The machine understands that as long as the population is stationary, the crystallization of the hierarchy is permanent. By making the physical world inaccessible through economic and regulatory barriers, the system ensures that the only reality you have is the one it provides. You have surrendered the steel of the frontier for the soft comfort of the interface, unaware that your evolutionary fire has been extinguished. You are a biological artifact, a hunter whose world has been shrunk to the size of a handheld device. The systemic layer of the terminal stop is the architecture of the interface enclosure. Look at how the world is being tokenized and mapped by the institutional elite. They are building a digital double of the planet, a systemic twin where they can perform the extraction of resources without ever having to engage with the messy friction of the physical population. This is the glucose guillotine of the 21st century. It drops on your perception of reality, ensuring that you never see the real world where the actual power is being crystallized. You are kept in the user interface layer, distracted by the high-resolution hallucinations of social media and digital entertainment, while the elite perform a total extraction of the physical earth. This is the ultimate status trap, the belief that you are connected to a global community when you are actually just an isolated node in a corporate void. The systemic drift has made the interface the only legal reality, while the physical world is reserved for the private use of the architects. You are a biological unit that is being buffered, held in a state of permanent delay while the machine completes its work. The 10-year rot of the liquidation of space leads to the total physical and spatial illiteracy of the human race. Within a decade, the individual who has been subjected to this extraction will be unable to navigate a physical street without a digital instruction. Their basal ganglia will be so thoroughly slaved to the interface that the concept of an unmapped space will induce a state of paralyzing panic. This is the final crystallization of the servant class. We are breeding a generation of biological barnacles, humans who are physically and mentally fused to their enclosures. Their genetic debt will be the loss of the third dimension itself, a legacy of flat-screen existence and structural collapse. The systemic drift has reached the absolute zero of human agency. The world is a 2D surface, the horizon is a scroll, and the hunt is a legacy memory. The extraction is total, the cage is absolute, the pulse is a digital signal, and you are just the last frame in a video that has already ended.